Hey guys, Jim Vinoski with Manufacturing Talks. Welcome back. Another great show for you today. I've got Jason Wells. He is with the Accelerated Training in Defense Manufacturing outfit, ATDM. Their mission statement is ATDM's mission is to train the nation's workforce in critical skills to make an immediate impact on the USA's defense industrial base. And so it's all about skilled trades training, technical training over in Virginia. And I think Jason's just got a phenomenal story around local efforts, state funding, federal involvement that, you hear so many horror stories, and this one is not that. This one is a positive story, really laying the groundwork to me for where we need a lot more of these kinds of efforts in the future. So a great example for others out there who might be wanting to emulate the success they've had. So Jason is going to be with us in just a few minutes to talk about it right here on Manufacturing Talks. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinoski. Industry has a million cool stories, and Jim talks to the movers and shakers who are making them happen. Let's dive in.
Hey, Jason, welcome to Manufacturing Talks. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Jim. Appreciate
thanks for being on. I think this is such an important topic, and you guys are doing some excellent work, and I can't wait to dig into it. So to start off, why don't you just tell us kind of the 10,000-foot level of what you guys do and how you got involved in it?
Certainly. So we're actually a unique entity. We are the Institute for Advanced Learning and Research. We're actually a political subdivision going on 25 years old in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We're located geographically in Southwest Virginia, a small town called Danville, Virginia. And being a political subdivision is a unique, I guess I'll call it, within the government structure of Commonwealth that allows us to have some state advantages, but really exist in a way that allows us to move like a business. So really lean into being agile and flexible. Our core mission as an institute is to be a catalyst for economic transformation. That's really what we were created for. Our local area here had a rich history of manufacturing. Our traditional industries were textile, tobacco, and furniture, like a lot of southern, southeast United States towns.
Yep.
By the mid 90s, all of those industries had been decimated, offshored. We all know what happened to tobacco. And when Big Tobacco got sued, the Commonwealth of Virginia created a commission called the Tobacco Region Revitalization Commission.
Oh, interesting.
It purposely flowed funding out of that lawsuit to areas that were impacted by the tobacco industry collapsing. And we were one of those areas. And that's where the initial funding came in for the Institute. That being said, we then used that investment to really lean in on what we were good at. We're a rural town, farming, community, at one time a really robust manufacturing environment around those traditional industries. So we had a tradition of manufacturing, and we knew we needed to somewhat lean into our strengths, but really embrace that around what is the evolution of those strengths, meaning how do we infuse skilled trades with technology and make sure that we stay on the front side of it, and just continually try to evolve it. So here at the Institute, we started to embrace and try to create workforce training platforms and programs that supported, I'll call them, really traditional skill sets like machining, welding, quality assurance, and fabrication, things of that nature. But then how was, technology integrating into those areas? How could we start to really get our skill sets to not fear technology deployment, but actually work with it and really embrace it in a way that they understood the acceleration that technology represents inside the manufacturing space. So we started, some 15, 16 years ago, setting up workforce pipeline
Mhm.
that really was infused with technology around those core manufacturing skill sets. We also knew that we had to change the tone a little bit around why around manufacturing. Some of the
Yeah.
I guess I'll call it the stigma that
Yeah,
hit us
you
in the
can be
late
you
80s
can
and
be
the early.
very frank with that here. We've discussed it at length, our denigration of that world.
Exactly. And, so we started putting labs into middle school. So we started our workforce
Oh, neat.
pipeline all the way down to the sixth grade level,
Yep.
getting sixth, seventh, and eighth graders touching desktop CNCs, doing augmented reality welding, 3D printers, laser cutters. And it really was to start building this pipeline, really priming the pump at an early age,
Yep.
kind of sparking that interest. But what we found when we started putting these labs in place is start opening up the minds of guidance counselors in schools.
Yeah.
That manufacturing careers were legitimate, that they were an actual opportunity. It started opening up the minds of parents as well, because they were going into these labs, looking at all this modern equipment, and they were like, "Wow, this is incredible! This isn't like my grandpa's machine
Right.
shop." I think they were all afraid their kids were going to come out with 10 fingers if they were lucky, So we
Yep.
so we really started to kind of break down some of that mindset and that mentality by, really integrating those labs in the middle schools. We also have, really good career technical centers at the high school level to help,
Yep.
continue to nurture that interest. So now the community was getting exposed to not just manufacturing again, but also the technology and how that was changing their misperception, I'll call it, of what manufacturing is.
Yeah. So let me jump in here. It sounds like from your genesis, you were really taking a broad brush approach and saying, okay, you've got people today or back then who were being let go from industries that were departing, and you were taking some steps to help them. But then you had that long-term vision of saying, yeah, in the meantime, we still have to have this pipeline of young people coming in as well. Uh, and then, so how did you balance those two needs of helping the people who were being displaced at the time while also building that future vision?
Um, I'll be honest. My entrance into this community was about the time some of that early investment was happening. I brought a company to the region, so I often say I
Wow.
was a customer of the institute before I was an employee of the
Oh, that's
institute.
great, though. I mean,
Um,
I've challenged industry to become involved in the way you're talking about.
Yeah, and it was about 11 years ago. We brought a division of an organization I was working for here, under an economic development effort. And I'll be honest with you, the reason we landed here was very much centered around that workforce pipeline that many
Mhm.
of the community leaders here had started to build. Um, it was, really, I will say what was inspiring was the community itself as well, because, you go on these economic development, trips, and you go to different communities and you hear different pitches, as you're
Mhm.
trying to think about expanding out as an organization. In this particular community, you could tell that the message was um, not just surface level. It was, they had a vision, they had a plan on how they were going to reinvent themselves, and that plan was well communicated, well connected, and understood from the common citizen walking on the street all the way to the most powerful politician or business leader in the community. So you had a lot of good foresight, a lot of good people that were, really campaigning hard and making sure that the message was consistent, was clear, really painting a good vision of, here's what the future can be. There's one gentleman, a gentleman named Troy Simpson, who was very instrumental in building a lot of this pipeline. He was a community college. We have a very strong community college here in town
Yes.
called Danville Community College, with a real rich history of machining. And Troy was one of the machining instructors that just had this vision of where it had to go and where it needed to be. Really started discussing, this and challenging and reaching out and building relationships with, different organizations that were well respected in the manufacturing space, bringing them into the conversation and really, letting them figure out that, this was going to take a community effort to, and a belief. But I hear this story that's told often that I think is really powerful, when you go and you start saying, hey, we need to invest money in our workforce pipeline. You get pushback on like, well, maybe we should, put in a new road, or maybe we should refurbish a building, or, maybe we should go promote something. But then how do you support it once you land? What if you're that proverbial dog that catches a car you're chasing? You got
right.
If you're going to try to, promote companies that come here and start rebuilding, you got to have the talent pool in place. But there's a story about how one politician said, we're going to educate all these people. We don't have jobs for them, and we're going to export talent. And, a very wise person said, definitely you are, but is it better to educate them and export them so they can succeed, or do nothing and they stay? So that was really kind of a turning point. So
it sounds like your area has been successful, though, in bringing industry in because you had that existing workforce, and then also looking to the future of saying, if we want to continue with that success, then we've also got to have this pipeline of people coming into industry and supporting it in the future. And so I applaud you for that. And I've been doing a lot of thinking for some work that I'm getting ready to launch into around all the just broad swath of workforce development efforts across the country. And what I see is the free market really working wonders. And your area is a great example of that, seeing that you had this shift happening in your old industries and the potential for new folks coming in. And then you got together locally and inside your state and made things happen. So you're a great data point in the research I'm getting ready to launch into with that.
Oh, great. Yeah, we'd love to, share. I think what was inspiring with this community is they didn't wait around for someone to show up and save them. Before, right now, and I know we'll get to talking about some of the exciting federal programs that have recently landed on our campus. Absolutely. And our national presence now, but before any of that ever showed up, this community had invested in excess of $80 million in itself to build this workforce pipeline. And I think what ends up happening sometimes is communities will wait for it to show up and then scramble to try to figure out how to react. Yeah. Danville really took the position of being proactive, building this excess capacity of talent and this excess capacity of capabilities so that, it created its own center of gravity. Now, you want to be as close to the source or the well as you can be. And that really was, now it's not so much of a sales pitch of like, we hope we can do this, or we hope we can do that, or with enough fun. It was, no, we have infrastructure in place. We have the training mechanisms. We're training, dozens of skilled people each day. So the talent pool is getting deeper and deeper with each graduating cohort. So it was really, was it a bit of a risk? Yeah, sure. But it was an absolutely brilliant calculated risk. Yeah. Because every economy, every nation has to make things to sustain themselves. So you create that talent and it just naturally attracts, the opportunities.
Yeah. But to your point, unfortunately, big swaths of the country, and they went the opposite direction and said, that's the old way, and we're a service economy now, and let's not train people for that. And that's led to some of the difficulties we have today. Sounds like, like you said, you had things to grapple with around tobacco being diminished and textiles largely going away. Shipbuilding obviously remains an opportunity, and that's one of your focus areas. So talk a little bit about that end of things.
Sure. Yeah. So roughly about 6, 7 years ago, our area got a lot of recognition. We were exporting talent because we just didn't have enough jobs available. So we had talented folks that were going out and working in other locations and other, in industries, and having really positive impacts in those jobs as they assumed them and as they went into that workspace. We also were, for, full disclosure, we were also competing in various skilled competitions like Skills USA,
Right.
Project MFG, and things of that nature.
Yeah.
And our students were having really good results, winning, some really good recognition through those competitions as well. So that whole, effort, combined effort started to attract some attention at a national level. And then at the time, there was a director. Her name was Adele Ratliff, who ran the IBAS office within the government, the Industrial Base Analysis and Sustainment Office,
Yep.
and they direct a lot of various funds on behalf of, at the time, DoD, now DoW, to look for opportunities around how do we increase the industrial, how do we support the industrial base, how do we mature the industrial base. She visited our community, and that workforce pipeline that I told you about, that we had spent 15 years building, that starts at 6th grade, and the beauty of that pipeline I didn't really mention is that it has multiple on and off ramps as well. So we have a dual credit high school program that allows students to come out with high school degree as well as 1 year community college finished. We have a great 2-year community college in Danville Community College here. We have a unique 3rd-year program that we host here on our campus, which is an advanced technician type accreditation. And then all those credits can articulate to a 4-year degree through Old Dominion University. So as an employer or a person in that pipeline, you can pull from multiple on and off ramps depending on what your needs are. And we're finding learners don't follow a linear path anymore. They kind of ebb and flow. They'll go out and work for a while and maybe go seek more manufacture or more education to advance their career in manufacturing. So our pipeline was built to allow them to kind of jump in and out of it where they needed, depending on where their career path was. So we demonstrated that to Miss Ratliff as she came through. The quote that's often used is she turned around and said, "I've been looking for this community my whole career." Now, how do you compress it and scale it and move out quickly?
Right.
So from that challenge, we developed a white paper around a program we call the Accelerated Training in Defense Manufacturing Program. And we refer to it, you know how we love our acronyms, especially around the military, ATDM.
Yeah.
So that is, and it is a prototype program. It's the only kind of it in the nation, with the mission of basically helping to address the skills gap that is specifically found in the submarine industrial base. Ultimately, the money flows from Navy through IBAS to support this program. And right now we're in the 5th year of the actual program being lifted. But the idea was to a heavy focus around submarine industrial base and also the defense industrial base and the gaps there. So it is a 16-week program that students can go through. They'll choose a path. We teach in 5 core disciplines. We teach subtractive, which is often referred to as CNC machining.
Yep.
We do welding and fabricating. We do additive manufacturing. We do non-destructive testing, and we do quality assurance or metrology. Those are the 5 core paths we train in. Student signs up and focuses in one key focus area. So if you sign up, you're 100% CNC or you're 100% welding. In that 16-week period, they acquire 600 hours of education. So we very much run, I always hate calling it a school. I always tell people that what we built here is a training experience. So we run the facility and we run the experience that the students have here, much like a manufacturing facility. So we have shift supervisors. Our students clock in and clock out.
Oh,
Our
interesting.
students work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So it's a 40-hour work week, education week for them. We run 24 hours a day. We run 3 shifts.
Really?
So we also do shift work with the students. So, so yeah, we have a 7 to 3, 3 to 11, 11 to 7 shift. We work to SOPs. We infuse Kaizens and lean management and 5S and a lot of the disciplines that they will be expected to be able to adopt and adapt to and then support when they get into that manufacturing space.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a curriculum built around it. It is their everyday experience when they come in, so that we're setting that tone and that pace and that mentality before they become, employed.
Right. Yeah. Even just the day-to-day experience being much more like what they're going to see in industry really has to set them up for walking onto a job site in a much better place than your average person coming out of the typical school.
Yes, certainly. I told you earlier that I started out a customer of, the Institute and what
Yep.
we do here before I became a part of it. And I can tell you as an industry person, before I became an employee, part of my ability to become an employee is that we engage heavily with industry. We don't want to sit in a silo and just try to guess what they need or guess what they want. We want to sit around with the table and, say, what's your aches and pains? Where do you see
Mhm.
shortcomings? What do you wish someone had when they showed up day one? And just really help that, drive our efforts, rather than just sitting behind a whiteboard trying to, figure that out. So
Mhm.
I did a lot of that, participating, and I guess I really drank the Kool-Aid strong and decided to become an employee and lead this line of effort,
Right. Right.
when the opportunity presented itself. But I wholeheartedly believe the mission. And after more than 30 years of just loving industry, being in industry, raising a family like I did, I had the unique privilege of traveling the world, working with different folks in manufacturing space, and just seeing how skilled trades is universally applicable around the globe. It's a
Yeah.
common language. We all, it's just such a phenomenal community. I just wanted to be a part of that. And so when we teach the students, when we bring them in, our mission is not just hard skills. We don't want to just teach them how to strike an arc or do a
Mhm.
G code or an M code or what have you. We
Mhm.
put equal emphasis on the work readiness skills,
Mhm.
why you have to work as a team, how do you have to communicate, things of that nature. We also cross pollinate paths. So, for example, our CNC students will machine a component, and then our quality assurance students will come over, grab that component, and do final inspections on them.
Yep.
And then they share their findings and their data. And every now and again, we have to referee those crucial conversations, if the readings don't match up. But
Yep.
hey, that's part of manufacturing.
Yep.
So,
Well, so your presence there to me is just a huge green flag with all the efforts because, again, I've been just beating the drum for years now about the need for industry to be hands-on involved with their local trade schools and community colleges to um, both foster the kinds of education you're talking about, but also have that um, cooperation in developing curriculums so they're serving the local needs and the industry needs. So I applaud you guys for that. Um,
thank you.
Now, when you look at what you have set up and how it's uh, feeding the needs of the companies, are you still working on gaps? Are you where you need to be? How is it in present day?
No, great question. I will say, as I often say to everybody that comes through on tours, we are still very much building this plane while we're flying it. So
Yeah.
there's definitely regularly lessons learned. So what we do in the school, we're not under an accrediting body. What we do is all of our students when they get out on the other side, their education is verified through industry standard or industry accepted certifications.
Okay.
So we've worked with our industry partners to identify bodies that they respect, that we can go then align with certification process to verify their skills, against. But partially that also allows us by being micro credentialed and using certifications to validate, the knowledge obtainment. It also allows us to stay really agile and responsive and flexible to adapting the program to needs. It's not a necessary for us to have to go through, a rewrite and a governing body to, necessarily go through this long, laborious process of like, okay, now you can start teaching this. And next thing you know, 18 months, 2 years have gone by, and technology is shifting far too fast for us to, sit there and wait for a bunch of people or a bunch of layers, in order to adapt to what industry's demands are. We got to move at the speed of industry. That's the only way.
Let me jump in there because I definitely want to remember that point for my work, because I've seen so many really effective training programs around the country that are, they're either aimed at a specific niche in industry or they're aimed at a specific group of industries locally, like what you have. What I don't hear a lot of, though, is that having that approach where you're not burdened by trying to be everything to everyone allows you to be a lot more nimble and serve the needs of your industry.
Yes, sir. Definitely. I mean, that's, we know, like, not to get too historic on you, but you look at,
as we said before we got on, you and I are both history buffs, so you can go ahead and get historical all you want.
Well, it's always amazing to me, like when you look at the country went from, say, industry .0 to industry 1.0, and then industry 1.0 to 2.0. We have these chapters in our manufacturing evolution that we kind of bookmark with those designations. And what's interesting to me as you read across is how each one of those pivots, the time to adjust compresses further. So, you go from like industry 0.0 to 1.0, it was about 100 years to that evolution. And then 1.0 to 2.0, it was 50 years. And, so you had plenty of time to adjust, to adapt, and just kind of slowly evolve if you were a late adopter or what have you, because you had this 150-year, multi-decade. But, I think about starting my career in the 80s. We're now entering into industry 5.0. I've seen in my career, 30 plus years, I've now seen 2 industry evolutions.
Right.
I've gone from 3.0 to 4.0, 4.0 to 5.0,
Yep.
And so I guess what I'm driving at is that's the beauty of technology. It's supposed to accelerate. It's supposed to compress that timeline, but it also means we no longer have that luxury to wait around and like see if it takes, or, maybe this is going to work out and we'll wait till everybody else does it and then we'll adjust, because, what took 25 years in the last, is it's going to take 12 years because it pretty much cuts it in half every single time.
Yeah.
So, with that mentality, you've got to be agile. You got to be flexible. You can't strap yourself to, overly burdened in procedures and processes to the point where, you just cannot make a move, or you're kind of stuck in cement. So
to get a little specific on that front, there's kind of this two-pronged thing I've heard from the shipbuilding world. One is that because of the near collapse of American shipbuilding, we're, as of last year, 0.04% of global shipbuilding output, that we've on one hand lost the old school knowledge, and that it's so difficult to stand up a workforce for any operation trying to get out of the gates today because we just don't have that tacit knowledge of the past. And yet in the same breath, people will say, plus, everything's moving toward automation and we just don't have that new skill around things like robotic welding or additive manufacturing. What are you seeing on those two sides of the coin with your efforts?
You know, we see both viewpoints for sure. You've been in the industry a long time, like I have, and
Yep.
there's always core principle, fundamentals, and foundational things, that are innate to each of the skills that you have to understand. I'll give you an example. We still, in our metrology lab, even though we have laser scanning and CMM and all these other things, our students still have to learn and master hand equip, micrometers and calipers and scales and things of that nature, because what it does is that's how you make that mental connection, as you
Right.
have to, actually physically interact with getting to that end result. That's how, it really clicks. So I'm still a firm believer in, you still have to have that foundation then to build off of it. We are seeing, we do incorporate, technologies. We're in the process of putting cobots into our welding lab because
Mhm.
they're having impacts in shipbuilding and submarine building. And we want our students to we don't want our students to run away from technology. We don't want them to fear it. And we don't want them to go into it with a mentality of it being the enemy or displacing us, because the truth of the matter, we have the workforce division on our campus, the training division here, but the other side of my team, I have two sides of my team, we do technology deployment as well. Because what we're finding is, we want our students to really understand that this is an accelerator that's necessary, because the unfortunate truth of the matter is the gap is so wide that you're not going to fill it simply with human beings. You're just not going to do it.
Right.
In fact, you don't have enough humans that want to work, unfortunately,
Well,
to fill that gap.
and our reality in the USA is we're not going to compete when it's brute force
Exactly.
labor either.
Exactly. So the only way you can compress that gap is from two fronts. It's going to be skill up the labor and create efficiencies by embracing technology.
Yep.
So what we want them to do is appreciate that technology, how it can benefit them, how they can work around it, with it, interact with it, and embrace it in that perspective. So we continue to bring that into the fold. We have another Navy program on our campus here that we're very proud to host and participate in. It's called the Navy's Additive Manufacturing Center of Excellence.
Neat.
And that division, that facility is basically operationalizing additive manufacturing into the supply chain. It's doing a lot of the first article engineering and the heavy lift on that to help operationalize AM. But it has tremendous technologies in it. We make sure that the students get exposure to it. We make sure that the students understand where the Navy wants to head, where the military wants to head. We make sure they understand why it's necessary. Again, explaining the compression of that gap, gaining efficiencies. And we try to really make them understand that, your skill set that incorporates technology is going to make you that much more valuable and add tremendous runway to your overall career path.
Right. Yep.
And that's really the end goal for us is, just to make sure. Now, I will say that we also try to encourage them to be, lifelong learners, because as I just said a little bit ago,
Yep.
pivots and moves quickly, so what they learn from us today as they graduate, like we graduated 100, I was telling you earlier, graduated 100 today. 10 years from now is going to definitely be different. So,
Yeah. And congratulations on the graduation. 100,
thank you.
that is a big number.
It is a big number. Yeah, certainly. We've in the 5 years of the program, we've now graduated nearly 2,000 students.
Wow.
So we're on a path. This has been a constant ramp for us. So year one, 5 years ago, we graduated 36 students. This year, we'll graduate nearly 700 students. And by the end of next year, we'll graduate 1,000 students.
So if we return to your comment earlier, or your sharing of the other person's comment about training people and having them disappear, how much has industry developed there locally where that number of students have opportunities in the area?
They do. The beauty of the ATDM program is it's a national program. So we have students that have come from 47 different states.
Oh, okay.
We've had students from in fact, today we had people from Guam that graduated, Puerto Rico, and we've even had a couple cohorts of Australians come through due to the AUKUS agreement. So,
Oh, yeah.
so we've had quite a footprint, and then we've placed students in over 43 different states. So the ATDM program was designed to be a national footprint because you can watch, if you have a very regionalized training network or training system, one of the challenges that you have is there are ceilings to it, to that region, and hiring trends will kind of ebb and flow.
Yeah.
So the hard part for some of those training programs is how do you stay relevant? How do you stay funded when, all of a sudden there's a surge and you're needed, and then all of a sudden you're not needed quite as much.
Right.
When you look at training across the nation and you try to manage it from a national footprint or a national perspective, it allows you to move wherever the surge or the demand is, and source students or support those industry and those surge needs, because you're managing it from a national platform as opposed to just like a 75-mile radius or 100-mile radius. So that's one of the advantages of the program.
And that's a great point you make. I'm personally philosophically a small government guy and a free trade guy. But I also, with decades and decades in industry, realize there's very real government roles to play, especially for the federal government. And you just spelled out one overview of the needs of the entire country and being able to shift and balance and get workers where they need to be. That's absolutely a needed and essential role that the federal government plays.
Yeah, I definitely want to give the government credit for the support they provided us in this ATDM program. I mean, it has been nothing short of inspiring. And, obviously I'm biased because I'm in the program, but, even just being a lifelong industrialist before I came here, it's like they truly are listening and they're truly respecting. My staff here is a combination of people that have that government experience, come from professional education, and industrialists like myself. And, and we're trying to bring the best of all that together. We're trying to bring it together around a common mission and a common purpose and with an understanding. But one of the things I'll say about the program is we have been very well resourced. And so, for example, we have a 1-to-1 ratio on equipment to student.
Oh, wow. Excellent.
And the beauty of that is it really gives that student an ability to lean in hard. We've learned in some of our other training paths where you may only have like a few CNC machines sitting in a corner and students work in teams. Inevitably, what ends up happening is you have one dominant personality that controls the experience for the rest of the group.
Right.
And that group can only learn as fast as the slowest learner.
Yep.
By having that 1-to-1 ratio and having a small teacher to student ratio, we have a 6-to-1 teacher to student ratio. What it allows us to do is not hold back high performers. So our high performers will just really take off, and they can start layering in certifications and, in their 16-week journey and just really start building it. And those other ones that may, be struggling in points in the process or what have you, we have the resources to get them across the finish line. We have the resources to be a part of it. So it allows each person to have their own individual journey, but also understanding, that's quite honestly going to be the dynamic within a manufacturing space as well, and so we're very grateful for the government funding us in a way that they realize the value in that.
Yeah. Well, and another point is your training by necessity is very hands-on. And so having that ability to go hands-on all day, every day is vital.
It is, without a doubt. It is definitely applied learning. One thing that we know about the skilled trades is it's not, it can't be isolated to a classroom. You have to actually be able to demonstrate the skill, which is the essence of a skill, so yeah, a vast majority, more in excess of 80% of our time is spent actually out in the lab. Most of the classroom time pivots around just because all of our students usually come in with zero background. I always say we're taking them from 0 to 60 in 16 weeks. But we, they don't, some of them may have had gig work, DoorDash, Uber, whatever, and they're looking for a career path. So they come to us. So a lot of in the beginning, I'll say few weeks, we have to do a lot around safety, getting their math skills sharpened back up, understanding how to read a drawing or a print or what have you. But as soon as we get comfortable there, it's out in the lab, it's making chips, it's welding joints, it's, inspecting things and, and giving them that rigor again of all day, because they're here at 8 hours. And it's not like they're only here on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It's Monday through Friday, 8 hours a day. So
that's intense. Excellent.
It is.
Well, we're about out of time. Closing thoughts.
Closing thoughts.
Threw you a curveball, didn't I?
Yeah, you did. You did. I was just used to just answering questions. No, I guess my closing thoughts are just that this is critical to our nation, and I hope most people realize, just the relevance and the importance. And I know that this has become somewhat of a popular topic, thanks to folks like yourself and Mike Rowe and others that have just been strong advocates for getting the word out. But the reality of it is our country has no future if we rely on other people to build for us. And I hope people also understand in communities the massive force multiplier that manufacturing represents to the economy. It is such a force multiplier to the economics, to the economy of every community. There's stats out there that will show you, that for every one manufacturing job created, there's 2.5 additional jobs, that come out of that, whether that's, service industry or sales industry or what have you. But it is the force multiplier, and then I guess, just making sure that, understanding also the beauty of, where innovation is birthed. I mean, we have been the greatest force on this planet has ever known on innovation and productivity. Right. And we got to stay there. But innovation is birthed out of problem solving, and problem solving only comes when you're building things. So there's a process there. I'll say one last history thing before we go, since you're a history buff, but if you ever look at the race to manned flight, there's a beautiful story there about Samuel Langley versus the Wright brothers. And Langley was certainly well-funded. He had the academic, he had the press, the media, and all that. Mm-hmm. But what the Wright brothers had, they were bicycle, manufacturers. Yep. So they understood making things with their hands. They understood motion. They understood balance. They understood failure, and then you rinse and repeat and you figure it out, those are the core lessons that we live in manufacturing every single day. Yeah. And that is what allowed them to succeed in that race. So,
and they were hands-on bicycle mechanics.
They were. And so
to our earlier points about that need.
We just, we cannot lose that as a nation. That is our competitive advantage. And quite honestly, it's the essence of America. We're
that
doers.
Reminded me of one point I absolutely wanted to make and almost forgot. Before we got on, I was talking about my concern that we're underestimating the skilled trade gap that Mike Rowe and other folks are doing such a great job of highlighting. And what I've seen is people are looking at the gaps in isolation, like I did in my nuclear work for the National Center for Energy Analytics. And it occurred to me, if we're all looking at that in isolation, no one's doing the grand add up of what the true gap is. And so what are you seeing in that regard?
No, I couldn't agree more. In my previous career before coming to the Institute, I spent most of my life working in the cutting tool industry.
Ah,
So, cutting tools are put into machine tools to make parts. The beauty of that industry is that it touches every industry. So what I would find is, unfortunately, industries will live within their silos themselves too,
Yep.
So, if you're in the agricultural industry, you kind of live in that silo. When I was in the cutting tool industry, the beauty of it was I was jumping, to all these different industries and
Right.
finding there were so many beautiful lessons over here that I could apply over there. And how do you get these folks to talk? And I say that because I do agree with you. I do concur that we do have to be very careful of defining the skill gap in a silo, based off of whatever industry sector or what have you. There is a compounding effect as you start to add up all of these gaps. If we have a gap in automotive, and we have a gap in aerospace, and we have a gap in medical, and we have a gap in defense, and if we're not adding those gaps together, if we're not looking at the impact of them, there's all, besides attrition, there's also migration of skills, that impact certain industries as well. So, those all play an overarching factor. But I think that at times we just got to be really cautious that, not to put blinders on, and just understand that strengthening the total industrial base, the overall industrial base, kind of the analogy of when the tide rises, all the boats in the harbor rise.
Right.
So we definitely have to be aware of our industrial health as a whole and as a nation, and just be careful not to think. And it's kind of a shame too if we think we're on an island and the only one suffering that pain. I think if collectively we could come together and realize there's a lot of similarities, a lot of parallels in the pains we're feeling. How can we collectively resource together and address those pains, as opposed to a million different little efforts going on? Is there an opportunity for us to pull together and make big moves, big needle moving moves? And I think the one thing I'll give again, the government credit is, I think that was kind of what ATDM was. It was a big investment. It was a large investment, and they needed to validate, can this move the needle? And fortunately, we've been able to prove that it can move the needle. Again, it goes back to why we have a national footprint. So, so I know I kind of went on there a little bit, but I agree with you totally. Is that there is a danger in saying that the skills gap is 10,000 per year or 15,000 per year, because I assure you the number is much larger than that when you look across the entire industrial base.
Yeah, which itself is a negative, and I don't want to end on a negative point. And you gave the positive end of it is, people in the past have kind of operated with the blinders on, and yet you see today that people are getting comfortable with tearing those blinders off and talking openly about this gap and how we've kind of inflicted it upon ourselves. And the good news is people are stepping up and trying to solve those problems. And so to me, being a believer in free markets, that realization of an even larger gap is a market signal. And we've got lots of young people who really weren't on board with everyone going to college and being an HR manager, and who want to get their hands dirty and go do cool stuff on a ship or in a nuclear plant. And so I think you're going to see more and more of this burgeoning trade movement pick up in response to that. And so I'm glad that folks like you are out there laying the groundwork for what has to come.
I appreciate that. I thank you for getting the word out. I mean, in this world of connectivity that we have, with everything being a mouse click away, if there's one, definite positive that comes of it, is our ability to communicate better and to communicate stronger, and to get the word out and on those on various platforms, and through, because we all receive information through various platforms. But let's utilize, again, going back to the technology we were talking earlier, let's use technology to make sure that we raise awareness as well, and we're connecting for the right reasons.
Very well said. And with that, Jason Wells, I thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much. Look forward to talking to you again.
Same here. Thanks.
Take care. Bye.
Well, that was every bit as cool as I thought it would be. I loved the story Jason had to tell. The local industry involvement is exemplary. I talk about that so often here, and great that they're out there setting that example. The success stories of government involvement that you also hear horror stories about. Hearing positives on that front is refreshing and much needed. So, Jason, I really appreciate your time and effort in what you're doing and in sharing your story. And I look forward to working on the op-ed around the need for even more of what you're doing out there. So that'll be cool. For next week, no guests, just me. I've got very exciting news about my book that's coming really, really soon. And so I'm going to have details coming real soon on how you can buy that and where you can find it. And then the other thing is I'm spending all of July on regulations, and I'll just be taking next week's show to really kind of lay the groundwork for the discussions we're going to have around regulations and their negative impact on manufacturing and our ability to compete. So all that's coming next week. We're here every Tuesday. Tune in. We'll have another great show for you. So in the meantime, this is Jim Vinoski with Manufacturing Talks signing off. So long.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinoski. Watch for new episodes dropping every Tuesday. And don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.